Hey there, welcome back to another video. So in my last video, I talked about the transit planets, what each of them means as those planets travel through your birth chart and through the different houses. But I left Mercury out and did that for a reason, is because I want to give it its own video. Because Mercury transits, Mercury retrograde in particular, is the one that people make the biggest fuss about, and I don't really think there's great reason for that. Although there is some statistical evidence that systems tend to fail during Mercury retrograde periods. It's more so just a crutch that people lean on uh, to delay certain decisions that really need to be made. So, out of laziness, a lot of people like to blame Mercury retrograde for why they are feeling a certain way, communicating a certain way, thinking in a more delayed manner, and why it is their things are going wrong for them. And a lot of times, if you have a sense for what is actually happening, independent of what you think should be happening, you'll find that Mercury retrograde isn't really any different from any other period throughout the year. In fact, Mercury goes retrograde 2 to 3 times per year, and you can't just halt on making decisions for a third or more of the year, or halt on work just because some external circumstances are a certain way, and that can be Mercury retrograde or anything else in your life. We have to take responsibility for ourselves and use astrology as a tool for better understanding ourselves and owning the choices that we make, rather than use it as a crutch to lean on for validating our delusions and lacking responsibility. It's about taking responsibility for yourself and helping you to own that process better, not to relinquish responsibility. There's all the more evidence in the insights that astrology gives us that we do have free will, and that we're on a spiritual path, and that we need to hold true to that, and that we need to stick by certain values that are worth it, that are going to improve our lives, and help us move forward in life. And if we don't take responsibility for these things, we're going to hold ourselves back, and so Mercury retrograde errors that occur, I think, are not necessarily a product of what's going on in the cosmos per se, but rather our conception of what it means produces a mindset and a consistent mode of thinking and behaving that ends up causing our own errors and our own delays and things. In fact, I find that this delay, you have to look at where Mercury is in your chart and what it's actually aspecting in any given period, any given transit period that it's in. Because it's going to show you where your place of processing is illuminated, is sped up, and is enhanced, we could say. Because Mercury is about rational processing and communication, and how it is that we speak, our style of speech, our style of communication, and our style of explaining things, relating ideas outwardly, not relating, but putting them out there, right? And so, it depends on the aspects where Mercury is. If it's in a retrograde period and it's stationing somewhere for a particular amount of time, maybe you have some squares happening to that Mercury, that transit Mercury in your birth chart, and that will indicate not just actual delay, but conflict between those parts of yourself and the outward processing of things, Mercury in the sky. So Well, lots of variables come into play when we're talking about how does Mercury actually work and what do the retrograde periods actually mean and what do they actually produce. That's a personal thing. Just because Mercury is in retrograde, that does not imply a particular course of action. you know um, Again, I'm an astrologer and I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm just helping them to understand themselves better so that they can more confidently own what they choose to do. Right? We still have to make choices. We still have to move forward. And Mercury retrograde doesn't simply place a halt on all things. In fact, if you're someone whose mind operates in a way that is, too much for your mouth to keep up with, Mercury retrograde can be good because it slows the mind down. It slows processing down a bit for that particular type of person. And it helps slow their mental processes to the speed that their mouth can actually communicate the words. You can put into like motor functioning um, what it is that's on your mind, what it is you're thinking. So that's one and arguably 50% of people are that way, due to the combinations of astrological placements that contribute to someone having a very active mind. It's arguable that half of the general population benefits from Mercury retrograde. So yeah, I think Mercury retrograde gets a bad rap, and Mercury itself is actually an underappreciated planet. It's very important, and it's always in pretty close proximity with the sun in your birth chart. No more than two signs away. Because astronomically speaking, what determines what sign Mercury is in? It's not a heliocentric system that we use. It's a geocentric system. So from our position on Earth, where is Mercury in relation to the sun? Well, it's the first planet from the sun. It's between us and the sun all the time. Even if it's on the other side of the sun, it's still maybe in the same sign as the sun. So it's never far away. If I'm right here on Earth and I'm looking at the sun right there, Mercury is always here or here or here or here, which means that it's never too far away from the perspective of your birth chart, right? So there's a symbol for that, right? Communication, the things that Mercury represents, rational processing, your connection to systems, and how it is that you process and communicate, put out the information that you have internally, how you make rational sense of it, right? The sun represents kind of our ego and the source of energy and the source of the production of a lot of those very ideas and thoughts and feelings as well. So Mercury is working for the sun in a way. And there's also sort of a, if it's not in the same sign as the sun, if it's not conjunct, then it's going to be in one of the side-by-side signs. And there is a neighborly relationship between side-by-side signs, if that makes sense. And that's what Mercury is going to offer the sun in a chart where it's in one of the side-by-side signs to the sun. It's going to offer a neighborly, more detached way of communicating the thoughts that the ego is producing. Is one way to think about it. Instead of being perfectly fluid with the thoughts themselves. Someone who has sun conjunct Mercury, for example, is going to be very they're going to be able to say what's on their mind very clearly and with fluidity, but they can also be quite rationally controlling and limit their understanding of a thing and even their identity, which is also what the sun represents, with their way of processing ideas, and with their style of communication. So it also depends, which comes first in that conjunction. But the sun in a tight conjunction with Mercury means that, yes, they're in perfect harmony in terms of like when one's engaged, the other's engaged. But it also means that the identity can, in some very large way, be constructed through one's overly rational conception of themselves, if that makes sense. And so that can be taken too far. Anyway, so kind of went off the rails as far as talking about Mercury, not just transit Mercury, but what it kind of represents in your birth chart. And so I guess we'll call this video ramblings about Mercury and astrology. But yeah, so that's a little video about the ramblings about Mercury and astrology. If you'd like to know where your Mercury is in your chart, you can book a consultation with me, see what role it plays in communication, style, and logic plays in your life, because those are the things that Mercury represents. And remember the aspects, how Mercury is connected to all of the other things in your birth chart. It's going to represent points of flow and harmony, as well as points of conflict and difficulty in communication style. So it's a very key part to the personality, Mercury, and it's often underappreciated. But we can observe a birth chart from that level. Some people do come to me wanting to know more about why their communication produces certain effects in the world. And it usually has to do with a conflicted Mercury in the chart. So hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.